Second live show with the Run Experience. So yeah, welcome along everybody. G'day Liz, how are you?
Good. How are you, Brad?
Yeah, I'm very good, very good. It's a beautiful Thursday morning here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The sun is shining in. It's supposed to be winter, but it's feeling rather warm here at the moment. What's the weather like in stateside?
Actually, it was really humid, and it's actually Wednesday evening here, 5 o'clock. But it was pretty humid this morning and raining. Although we really do need the rain. I'm always happy because I have my garden that needs it. And but as of right now, it's a beautiful breeze. Sun is shining, and I can't complain. I don't know if you guys can see it. I just have all trees out there, but yeah.
Nice, nice. So do you have a vegetable garden? Do you grow your own vegetables?
Not yet. So that's obviously this is right in line with what we're talking about today. But I am not. But I did have a good friend of mine who started her own business as a garden coach. I had no idea that that was something that existed. And she came out and did measurements for me. And essentially, she would help me build some raised beds to put my garden in because I really don't have good soil here. It's all very acidic due to all the pine trees. So she essentially gave me exactly what I would need to do, what plants would grow when to plant them. And yeah, she did all that for me. So, yeah. So unfortunately, I didn't get to do it right away this year. I still have flower garden, but next year I've got everything planned out. So
Oh, that's exciting. That's actually really exciting. I think that's what we need more of in our society is people coming around and teaching people essentially to grow their own food. I think if we
yes.
did that a little bit more, I think it could solve quite a few possibly of the world's problems. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, in her passion, I'll have to say a shout out to Ashton Seto. She hasn't gotten anything up and running. She's doing this very quietly right now. So, but yeah, her passion is actually after becoming certified functional in functional nutrition world to teach people how to grow gardens to help actually any certain ailments. So you'll be growing food essentially that would for certain minerals, nutrients, phytochemicals, anything that you are looking in specifically, she helps you kind of grow your garden towards that. So something I see as like a future doctor, right?
Yeah, I think it's a future pharmacy. I personally think that Hippocrates saying "Let food be thy medicine." I think there's something just really true about that. It just resonates so much with what we're trying to get across, hopefully in this podcast. And I think a lot of practitioners are cottoning on to the idea that we do need to make sure we eat real whole food grown in soil without the use of excessive pesticides and excessive agrochemicals, because what that's going to do is provide a nutrient dense source of food that's not going to interrupt and create issues within the body. So getting back to those basics, cultivating good soil, growing real whole food, get it out of the ground with minimal processing, that really is, I think, the platform and basis for good nutritional health. And so that's really exciting to hear that you've got people already doing that, because in New Zealand it's becoming bigger and bigger, more regenerative type agriculture, more organic methods of farming, of horticulture. And I really do think it's the way forward. And yeah, so that's great to hear.
Yeah. Actually, it kind of reminds me of a podcast I just recently listened to, and I wish to goodness I could remember the gentleman's name. Joe Rogan podcast, of course, but this gentleman was talking about the soil problem that's actually happening, and it's not just in the States, it's all over the world. So definitely creating your own compost to nourish your own gardens at home is huge. And that's something that I kind of a funny story is I've been composting for years, but I don't know if I'm doing it right. So that's like something it's just throwing stuff in a bin outside and just letting it sit there and thinking, well, nature will take its course. And for sure it did, but didn't break down nearly Like, I think I've had this compost pile since I moved in like 10 years ago, but it's finally, after talking with my friend who is the garden coach, now it's actually beginning to break down and becoming something I can actually use in my garden. So, and that's using, uh, brown, which is your leaves, dried up leaves that you rake up in your yard, and then also your kitchen, leftover kitchen things, essentially leaving out any meat, dairy, oils, just keeping it, your fruits and vegetables, etc. So yeah, that's, I'll find it and I will put it in the description once I'm able to find it. But the gentleman who talks about the soil problem and how if we can all do more regenerative gardening, or even, in the commercial field, the earth is just going to be better off for it. And so will our food, because our food is essentially becoming demineralized because it gets its minerals from the soil. So
Yeah. That's absolutely right. And I like to look at the similarities between our gut biome and then the soil ecosystem, because when you have healthy soil, you've actually got around 9 billion microorganisms per teaspoon. So it's really important to make sure that we maintain really good soil integrity and health. And as you say, if that's the case, then whatever's grown in that soil is going to be more nutritious, going to have more mineral content. It's going to be able to have more vitamins, even more. I've seen some research to show that if you treat soil with lots of agrochemicals, the produce that's coming out of the ground is going to be less nutritional. It's going to have less nutritional quality, and it's going to be actually just not as good for us. So it does get back to that soil and looking after the soil. And composting is a great way that we can all do that. I've got friends that are big composters, and it works really well, and you can then reuse that, because the earth on the whole is losing a lot of topsoil, losing a lot of that good quality into the oceans, and getting washed out with erosion. So it's really important for the basis of good nutrition is good soil, and if we can all do a little bit to help that, it's going to be very, very useful.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think this is great start off, because if you think of the soil is the foundation for all our food, and moving into food just for living, I think I can say for me, one of the number one questions I get when I start training someone or coaching someone is, like, what do you mean by clean eating, and what do you mean by whole foods? And they essentially, some of them can gather what it means, but like on a clear definition of what those are, I think maybe, Brad, you can tell us what that is. Like, what do you consider clean eating, and what do you consider, and I know they go together, whole foods?
Yeah, I think you got to be careful with that term clean eating, because it can mean so many different things to different people and different organizations. I like to go back to the whole food, I suppose, way of describing your eating patterns. And that's basically eating food that's as close as possible to the way that it's grown, the way that it's actually harvested out of the ground. So it's as close to that as possible. There's going to be some processing, minimal processing to get it to the table, but you want to make sure that you're getting it in a state where it's as natural and as whole as possible compared to when it was actually cultivated and grown and actually harvested. So it's about getting, basically, you need to have good amounts of fresh fruit, vegetables, seeds, nuts, legumes, beans, those sort of things is really, really important. Leafy greens. And if you can do that and make that a good base for your eating pattern, you're going to do really well. As soon as you start to shift towards a processed, ultra processed type of way of eating, then that type of food, if you want to call it that, has the nutrient value stripped away. It usually has a lot of additives added in terms of sugar, salt, trans fats, and sometimes even other chemicals to preserving agents. And then it's packaged up, so it's got a longer shelf life. As soon as you start moving towards that way or that direction in the spectrum, you're moving away from that sort of whole food mentality and eating pattern. So Yeah, I would describe the healthiest way of eating as more towards that whole food, getting your food as close as possible to when it was actually harvested with minimal processing, and stay away from the hyper processed, high calorie, low nutrient food items that we see so much in our supermarkets.
I think this is something I think I've noticed is when it comes down to like actually surviving in the world, like if you're ever in a situation where you had to survive and maybe you don't have your garden, maybe like some of these processed foods will help you to survive, like putting food in your stomach. But when it comes to actually living and thriving and not being malnourished, the best bets, and because we still have a choice, right, is eating whole foods, eating those foods that are directly from the ground. So I see like in myself, I will just kind of give an example of my life growing up. My father, was 66 when he had me, so he was older. He lived through the Great Depression here in the United States, and they went through that actual survival point. So like where they were literally, they created their own farms so that they could raise their own cattle, raise their own chickens, and things like that. But also, canned goods was huge then. So just they stocked up and stored when they could. And so I grew up in a house where, that food was readily available. I can say like ramen noodles was like my favorite thing. And it was always readily available in our cupboards, and things like that. But I can say, as I got older and I started realizing like, playing sports or doing anything, I didn't always feel great. And what's kind of funny is a lot of the foods that I chose were very high carbohydrate, high glycemic. So like talk about crash and burn. And I didn't really know anything about protein or healthy fats at the time. It was like, oh, protein, probably chicken, right? Or, you go out for Chinese food, your beef teriyaki. So that was like my knowledge of nutrition growing up until I started getting more heavily into running and realizing that running is something along with other sports. Like I think anyone will take the turn, whether you play football, that's states or across the pond, which is another high cardio style of sport. You start to realize like, oh, eating whatever I want doesn't always work. And what if I could fuel instead of just eating towards my actual sport or towards a better lifestyle or just performance. I want to perform better. So essentially kind of putting like that higher octane fuel in your gas tank. You are also finding that higher octane fuel for your own body. And I think that's your fruits, your vegetables, your legumes, your dark leafy greens, things that your body can actually recognize when you put it in. So,
yeah, I think you touched on a really important point, and that is that malnourishment. And if we look at the greater spectrum of things, like the world we've got almost 8 billion people. We have 2 billion people that are malnourished and obese, and then we have 1 billion people that are malnourished and starving to death. So you can be malnourished when you have an excess of calories.
Yes.
And you can also be malnourished with a deficiency in calories. So it's about making sure that you look per calorie. You want to have more nutrition, more vitamins, more minerals, more phytonutrients. You want to have that maximized per calorie. And if you can do that, that again just goes back to that eating whole foods, fresh fruit, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, not highly processed grains. leafy greens and quality meat if you choose to eat meat in the diet. So it's really about making sure you do get back to those basics, and then I think we can again solve some of these big issues. And the other thing I did want to bring up is that the world on the whole wastes between 20 and 30% of its food produced. So actually, it's not only about eating that whole food, it's making sure that you plan and prepare so that you minimize wastage, because as a society, we waste so much, especially good food, and doing that has major implications on our society. So don't waste your food, and that goes back to preparing, actually making a list, a meal list, shopping for that list, so you don't have excessive stuff that you then throw out at the end of the week because you haven't used it. So it does go back to the basics. And I think with nutrition, as it is in training, as it is in a lot of aspects of life, it comes down to that preparation and planning. There's no quick little hack that's just going to change you. You've just got to go out and put that time in. And if you can do that, you'll get the results, because you're going to be consistent with that preparation, planning, and then executing how you want to eat and move towards who you want to be. And on run experience here, it's about running better. It's about having a better experience when you run. Well, to do that, you've got to fuel your body with that high nutrient fuel. As you said, you want to optimize that fuel. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, that the whole going to the idea of waste as well. It's another thing that when I was growing up, and it's funny because I am a certain generation growing up, but because I had an older father, it's almost like I'm a couple generations behind everybody. So I'm a little more old school than the typical person my age. And then, like wasting food was very, very frowned upon in the household as I was growing up as well, because again, it came from that you don't know if you're going to have a meal the next day. So my father actually living through that, it was always don't ever waste food because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So the fact that you say, plan ahead, like get your menu ready, plan your meals for the week, and then just cook away. It's actually a lot more simple. What I found over the years is like the simpler, the better. And that could mean buying a sack of sweet potatoes and then popping them in the oven. And, you've got baked sweet potatoes ready on hand all week. There's your vitamin A, there's your potassium, along with a lot of beta carotene, a lot of other things that you get from that. And that's a high nutrient dense food. Grain bowls are huge for that, I think, without getting too much into it. But yeah, like you can make it as simple or as complex as you want. And I always say start off simple and then work your magic and work your way and have fun with it. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Actually, we've got someone in the comments, John's
Yes.
just talking about some of his favorite authors. And yeah, I agree. Like Joel Salatin is fantastic. I've read a little bit of his stuff. And there's actually a few farms in New Zealand that are taking on his expertise. And they've transformed their farms. And so there's one farm in particular, I think in the Taranaki region, where they've actually looking at regenerative type agriculture, and they're growing the grass really long and letting their cows graze on this grass. And they've actually decreased and eliminated the need for synthetic fertilizers to grow their crops. They're actually doing it now organically, regeneratively. So they've actually reduced the cost because they don't have to put as much input into the land, and they've maximized that output because they've got the soil generating the crops well, and the cows are eating that, and then they've got some fantastic crops going as well, and they've got sort of a circular thing going on, and it's just great to see. And look, it took a few years for them to transition over to that way of doing things, that regenerative sort of almost rotational type way of cropping and using the animals in a line with the crops, but it worked really well, and now they're maximizing their profits. So it can be done, but it just requires some patience in that sort of transition time to be able to do that. So I just wish more farmers would look at doing that, because we would then solve a lot of our issues with wastage, because too much synthetic fertilizer on the soil, not only does it destroy the soil health, but you get runoff into the rivers, which then destroys water quality, groundwater quality, and then it creates dead zones in the oceans. There's so many negative side effects to using high amounts of synthetic fertilizer. And we do need to move away from that if possible. So thanks, John, for that comment. That's really good to get those resources there.
Oh, we actually got another question. Monsanto, no.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not sure what the take on Monsanto is in the States, but in New Zealand, we think it's overly commercialized and taking some of the rights away from some of the smaller farmers to farm in a way that actually our great grandparents did. And there might not be massive amounts of corporate profit there, but what it will do is feed communities really well and really healthy, and just demonopolize, I think, the food industry away from large corporates and just get back to some smaller type communities working together and cohabitating and using bartering and things. I just think getting back, I mean, this might sound a little bit quaint, but I think it is the way forward. I think it's communities working together, sharing resources, eating food that's produced close to where you live if possible. I know that's not always possible, but if we can do that more, man, what a great world it would be, and in the States, the United States has some fantastic areas where really arable crops, really good soil, and you don't want to be destroying that with large amounts of synthetic fertilizer and genetically modified crops. Get back to basics.
Yeah. So here where I live, so I tend to live in a small, very small town and rural areas where I have just mostly trees surrounding me, but I do have a little farm right over there. It's not mine. It's owned by a family that's been farming for many, many, many years. Just one patch there. It used to be covered everywhere, and he slowly sold parts of that land, or not sold, but gave to his children so that they could build houses on it. And now he's got one small section in his years of getting ready to retire. It's just enough for him to handle. And but we have a lot of farmers in this area, and they're traditional. Most of them are going organic. And I have to say, for someone who doesn't have a Whole Foods market close by or anything like that, I mean, I have to travel a little bit because I am in a small town. Having these options, we have a farmer's market. We have pretty much each town does their own day, and each, throughout the week, you can pick wherever you want to go. And you're going to save money. If you can find farmers markets, I personally, I can bring a $20 bill and walk out of there with 3 or 4 bags full of just fresh produce that was literally picked that morning. Still has the dirt on it, So, I think, it says here, I apologize. Can you see the comments, everybody? It looks like someone can't see the comments.
I think, hopefully if you just push on the comments rather than the private chat, that might make it a bit easier, but hopefully people can see the comments that are coming up. But it's really good if you can get communities supporting these farmers markets, because at the end of the day, you want more money to go directly to farmers and to be cutting out some of the corporate middlemen. I mean, that might sound a little bit harsh, but if you get the farmers getting a very smaller cut, what they will do is try and produce more food more cheaply. And to do that, you need synthetic fertilizer, and you just create, I think you kill the golden goose. The soil gets eroded, the soil quality goes down. So if you can try and buy directly from a farmer, or with less steps in between, more money will go to the farmer, and it'll be less sort of cut up along the way. And that's the way to do it. We really do want to make sure that we're supporting our farmers and making sure that they get a lot of the profit, rather than it being cut up along the way. So if you can go to those farmers markets and support your local farmers, then please do so. That's a really great way to support what you want to see with the money that you make. Because at the end of the day, your money, what you spend your money on, is one of the biggest votes that you can do in our market economy to show what you want to see. So, how you spend your time and how you spend your money is literally a vote in how you want society to go, or what direction you want society to go to. So that's a really good point.
So we do have a question. Zabeda, it looks like, Hi, how can I start from scratch? It's been a long time since the last time I went for a run. I used to follow Galloway plan, but I can't do it now. That's actually a really great question. If you're starting off as if I always say, like, if it's been years, you want to start off as if you've never ran before. And I know this topic today is more around nutrition, but I didn't want you to think that we forgot about you over there. But starting off small, slow, easy runs is super important for building your musculoskeletal system to get back at it. It will come back faster depending on how long you had been running in the past. If it's something that you had enjoyed for years, your muscle memory will come back a little bit quicker than, say, someone who's actually never ran before. But I say starting off, we have a specific plan for that. It's the beginner running program, and it's something I personally did after taking a leave from running as well. So, and what you'll find in there is run form drills. So something that I never knew existed when I first got into running, but run form drills, daily mobility, essentially you're going to be unlocking your own natural stride through that. Strength training specific for runners, specific for beginners as well, and then your quality runs. So you'll actually be dialing in a little bit of speed, a longer run throughout the week, and of course an easy run. So
yeah, I think it's a good point. I think that a good thing to start with is looking at even that jog walk type way of doing it. If you haven't run for a long time, just doing a jog walk where you might go out and jog for a couple of minutes, walk for a minute times 4, twice or 3 times a week, and then build up by 20% duration every week from there. But starting off slowly is the key. A lot of people start off with a hiss and a roar and then get injured. And a lot of the time, it's just understanding that our joints, our bones need time to absorb that load. And if you don't give it time, then you're going to create an injury. And so you just don't want to be doing that. So just start off slow with a longer time frame in mind, and that's a better way to go than trying to start off at a hiss and a roar with 5 runs a week. So just start off with 2 or 3 and then build from there. And as Liz said in the app, there's a really good beginner's guide there to download. It takes the guesswork away, the decision fatigue away, and you can just follow it. And it's tried and true, and it works really well.
Yeah, I would even dare you, if you did. We'd love to have you in the app. We've got coaches such as myself in there answering questions daily for our athletes. But we would also challenge you not to follow it to a T. If it's something, if maybe there's too much mileage, too much time on feet, so to speak, your first week getting into that program, we challenge you to dial it back and get into something that's a little bit less running, like our Start Running, Stay Running program, or the daily run where it starts you off at 10 minutes. And you can do that a few times, 2 to 3 times a week. You pick. There's also recovery sessions in there you could choose instead of the running. And yeah, it's all about listening to your body. And I know everyone goes, and I think it's famous because Dean Carnassi says, if I listened to my body, I'd sit on my couch eating pizza and beer every day. But there is a healthy dose of listening to your body when you do become a runner, when you do become an athlete. And no, don't kid yourself. You're a runner, you're an athlete. So, remembering that, take care of your body and it will take care of you, especially if you want to continue to run and have fun with it.
Yeah, I agree, Liz. I always say to my athletes, listen to your body before you listen to your coach.
Yes.
You really want to compromise, because the coach will give you, and the app again will give you these guidelines, these spectrums, and you've got to go and you can use those frameworks to build things up, but you've got to listen to your body first and foremost. And if you don't do that, if you just become externally motivated and look at things to tell you what to do, and you don't listen to what's going on inside you, that's a surefire way to get injured or to even overtrain. So it really is important to get that mix right. And that's where coaching, I think, is a bit of an art and a science. And once you get that lovely collaboration between those internal messages and then the external guidance that you're giving, collaborative approach, that's when the magic happens. And so I always try to get my athletes to think about how they're feeling during the run, how do they feel afterwards, and just get a little bit of a picture. And as you start to develop that picture more and more, the focus improves, and then you start to really move into that magic space of getting improvement.
Yeah, for sure. It's so I love that you say that, because like it really is an art. It's an art having a coach and athlete relationship as well. Like as a coach, as coaches here at TRE, we've got these programs that have been created for everybody, but you have us on the back end to talk to and discuss like what you are feeling internally, what's going on. Look, I've got this speed session scheduled today, and everything in my body is telling me I can't do it. And then getting that conversation going, if it is it up here or is it within your body, and you building that relationship or rebuilding that relationship with your own self as well is so important. Because I think in the society we live in, this is just a kind of a quick side note, is that a lot of us are kind of conditioned to stop listening internally, to stop listening, and that somebody else is going to know better than me. But I think and this is something here I am 38 years old, and I'm like, well, I'm becoming like the expert to myself, so I've been in this body a long time. So, and have been trying to mentally check in, focus in, whether that's through breath work, through meditation, and just learning who I am, what my body can handle, and then communicating that with my coach, or communicating that with, whomever I might be around at the time who wants to listen, is important, because whatever you're feeling, if it's you are like, this is just not going to happen. You need to listen to that. And maybe you choose that recovery day. Maybe you swap things around in your schedule for the week, or skip it all together and you'll hit it next time. And that's okay. I know that in specific situations where you're training for, say, a marathon or a half marathon, you've got that goal race, you've got it on the calendar. That can feel really exciting, really important, and really help drive your focus, but not allowing it to also derail you and thinking so far that, oh my God, I've got to be here, here, and here, and here, and here, that it becomes more stressful. Because the majority of us, right, we're all living lives as parents, maybe, as spouses, maybe, partners. We've also got jobs. We may be going to school. We've got all these other stressors that, your body does not know the difference. Your mind does not know the difference between the stresses. Stress is stress. And remembering that this is supposed to be fun, right? Like I do this because I need to do this, because I need to clear my head, or it's a mental checkout, or it's my time to be in nature. It's a good idea. I mean, you want to, stay in the moment for sure. And that's a good point. What about David Goggins? David Goggins is a special case. I haven't coached anyone like him. He's a 1 in a billion. He's so motivated and awesome, but I wouldn't recommend his training methods for everyone. That's for sure. Yeah, the untraining method for his first 100 miler, right? That's what led absolutely to broken bones.
Don't run on broken feet. That's probably some good advice, but he would say the opposite. Christopher has got quite a good question. Do you have any tips for getting enough calories for your long run days? These 4-hour sort of runs. He's sort of saying that he tries double breakfast, he eats whole foods, but he still lands in massive deficit. So I would suggest one thing that I do on my big days is I make sure that I have a breakfast smoothie in addition with my soaked oats. So with that breakfast smoothie, I can usually get in, especially with some nut butters and some protein powder and some cacao powder, bananas, frozen berries. You can get in some oats. You can get a lot of extra calories in that smoothie. The other thing I would say is making sure that you're fueling during your run. When my athletes run over an hour and a half, and even though they're running slowly, so they're predominantly burning fat, it's still really important to top up the fuel source and making sure that you're taking on some really good carbohydrates during that run so that you don't go into too much of a deficit. So my favorite go-tos have got to be some of my homemade foos balls and homemade bars that I make. Erin has got some great recipes actually on the app. those delicious plant-based bars with dates and almond and things. You make them up, and make sure that you have a few of them on your run. Majuli dates, I love Majuli dates. I mean, they are nature's candy. And so I'm popping a few of those during my long runs. And then I find that if I'm eating enough during my run and have a good breakfast, and then eat well in the other parts of the day, I won't be going into a deficit. So I think the fueling during as well as the eating around it is very important, especially on those big run days. Do you have anything to add there, Liz?
Yeah. Christopher, I guess my question for you is like, a couple things like, how do you know you're in a deficit? Are you actually tracking your nutrition in an app or in a journal? Or maybe you're doing both. Is it because of the way you feel? So I've personally experienced when I've been in a deficit, like that catabolic feeling where, like you have not gotten enough food, like you're on edge, your stress level is a lot higher. You are experiencing irritability very quickly. And this is all kind of related to, not keeping your blood sugar at a good level. But also because of the deficit, because perhaps you haven't enriched your muscles enough for what you've done. So just like Brad was saying, you've got to fuel during, you fuel before, and you certainly got to fuel after. And that 15 to 30 minute window is super important for post run, especially those long runs. Got to get that carbohydrate in, and you got to get some protein in too, because, what the whole point of fueling during the run is so that you're not actually completely tapping out of your stores of glycogen, and at some point, depending on how long your runs are, you're probably going to tap out, unless you're staying right on top of it. And you made sure that you had a nice, healthy, nutritional meal prior to the long run. But if you're not able to keep up with it, especially if you're not able to keep up with it by the end of that run, when you are done and you're about to start your stretch, I would argue to say, instead of going to mobility right away, you hit the kitchen, you get that protein, and you get those carbohydrates in your body immediately. And then about 1 to 2 hours later, and I would say, especially if you're going on longer runs, an hour later, you're eating a full meal, making sure that full meal is in there and that you've got those grains. Maybe it's a rice bowl that you made for yourself prior to going out, big rice bowl or quinoa bowl. You've got your dressing, perhaps made out of cashews, lemon juice, garlic, something super simple. And then you're loading it with veggies. You've got some protein in there, so that that you're hitting all your marks. And what you do today always affects tomorrow. So if you did not fuel appropriately, if you did not have that fuel right away, if you did not have that bigger meal of an hour later or two, you're going to feel it the next day, and your run might feel it. Your performance is going to feel it. And this is something I actually personally experienced, because there was days that I was just like absolutely drained, but I knew I had to get out there and I had to get my run. And I was like, well, I guess it's just normal to feel like this all the time. But actually, it's certain ways it is, and for this particular way, it isn't. Like that feeling I was explaining earlier of feeling like irritable and you're on edge or overstimulated. You're probably in that catabolic state where your body is actually going to start breaking down muscle to fuel itself. And that's a dangerous place to be if you are looking to perform, if you are training towards something, or just trying to be fit overall and keep on muscle. You don't want to lose that muscle. So,
yeah. And there's another good question here too, saying, hey, I'm a strong man trying to make a lifestyle change, 5'11". Right now he runs 2 miles in about 27 minutes. But the back of the legs are hurting when they run. What can I do to stop the hurting? I would say you've got to make sure you stay within your capacity to start with. So you might want to break that run up with maybe some walks, even do some cross training, a little bit of cycling, something that's a little bit less impactful on the body, and then bring that running in just a little bit more slowly. I always say to some of my athletes, if you go out, you're not tolerating that amount of load, wait for 2 or 3 days and then halve it and try again. So it's about staying within capacity and making sure you're starting within capacity to be able to build. If you start just a little bit beyond your capacity, you'll continue to bang your head against a brick wall, and it's very hard to make progress. So if you're making that lifestyle change, and you're well muscled and quite heavy, you want to give your body a bit of time to be able to get used to that loading. And so just bring it back a little bit, try some cross training, a bit of cycling, maybe even swimming. I'm a big advocate for swimming, and then that's really going to help you then put that running on in a more graduated way, staying within capacity, allowing you that window to be able to build without getting those pains in the back of your legs. So that would be something that I would add there.
Yeah, Brad, I think I have a question for you on that. When we say, and you're explaining impact, what is the impact? What is it? Double your weight comes down with every step, or is it more?
Yeah, it's even more than that. And it depends on your running gait as well. And especially going downhill, you're looking at maybe 6 to 7 times your body weight in each footfall. And it's more than double, I think, on the flat, depending on how you run. So it's a lot, And if you're weighing 200-300 pounds and you're well muscled and you go to run, then that's going to create some issues. And I'm more worried about the bone. Actually, the bone takes a long time to be able to adapt that absorption, and so you have to just give it time. And so I really think for people that are a little bit heavier, with a lot of muscle or carrying a little bit of extra fat, it's making sure that you start off well within that capacity and just give your body a chance to absorb that, especially your bones, to absorb that load, so that you don't create, the worst thing that people can do is create those stress reactions. So you've got a spectrum. You've got the stress reaction going towards a stress fracture. And a lot of people will start to feel that sort of bony pain, but just continue to run through it because they think they have to, because they've listened to too much David Goggins. When actually what you want to do is bring it back a little bit, listen to the body, and just build it up even slower. So yeah. I think listening to that body, it goes back to listening to the body, not being afraid to take a bit of time off, maybe cross train. You don't have to stop training, just to train around your body's ability to absorb load and develop your cardiovascular system, and then work within that capacity and build up.
Yeah, definitely. I have to give you kudos. Down Dirty 97. I know that's not your real name, but making a lifestyle change, first of all, kudos and congratulations to you for making that choice. That's like one of the hardest steps, is making that first choice, is lacing up your sneakers. You say, I'm going to do this. And so I congratulate you for making the decision. I congratulate you for doing your 2-mile runs and coming here to see us and getting more information so that you can be successful on this journey. Your success isn't always linear either. So remember, just like what Brad was saying, you've brought yourself to this point, okay, maybe dialing it back, that will lead to success more than just push. And you're coming from the strongman world, right? Where bigger, stronger, that's and you're constant, those big loads, your strength training, not strongman isn't so much physique, obviously. It's more about actual brute strength. And just remember that, you're putting your body in a different position now. It's doing a little something for you, but just like it took care of you during your strongman journey, making this change, it will take care of you as long as you're taking care of it. But I just wanted to say kudos and congratulations on making the steps. And, you came to the right place. We have plenty of spots too that you can check out on our YouTube channel, but also in our app, in regards to what to do when something does start to hurt. And just like Brad said, cross training is on that list at any time. And you need to replace that 2-mile run, that 26 to 27 minutes, with something else. Swimming, man, you're off your bones there. Low impact, if any impact.
Yes. Swimming is underrated as an exercise. I think everybody should be doing it. Got another couple of questions here. One from Sarah: the best running shoes for women with fallen arches that are a heavier weight. My advice to that is go and develop a good relationship with your sports shoe store. and go through the options, because every shoe line now has those more cushioned shoes with that more supportive to support that extra the arch, so you don't go into too much supination. So I think it's about going and just developing a good relationship with your local sports shoe store and going through the options and trying them out, because every brand now has a wide array of shoes. And for me just to say, oh, you've got to go and try this out, that's not going to be helpful. You've got to go and try different shoes, get some good advice from someone that knows what they're talking about, and just get the shoe that's right for you. So that would be my advice there. And then there's another question: tips for breaking the mental barrier telling you to stop. That's a really good question. So
that's the fight, man. That's the fight we all have, right?
Yeah, that's the business. That's the source, So I think at the end of the day, it's about questioning yourself why, and why are you getting out and doing what you're doing. And if you've got a bigger purpose that's aligned, that's going to help you then maybe break through that a little bit. It's also trusting the process, making sure that you've got a plan that is allowing you to progress, so that you know that you're breaking through that next barrier with the right amount of work behind and knowing where you've got to go. So I think once you know where you are on your plan, that really helps get past sometimes that mental barrier. And that's where the app is really good as well. It has those programs that you just trust. You just trust that process, and if you're going to go out and not feel that great, you know that if you just push a little bit more, it's going to fit with where you are on that plan. So I think that's really important.
For sure. I think we also even have the mental training guide that I think hasn't gotten really much late, other than the month of May when we showcased it for free for everybody in celebration of Mental Health Awareness Month. But that mental barrier, like the mental training, is just as important as the physical. It is. It literally is part of the entire process. And I think some tips for you as well on my end would be, ask yourself, am I okay here? When you get to that point, like, let's have a reality check with yourself, like am I okay? Yeah. Can I keep going? Yeah. It's kind of like the movie Liar, Liar. Remember when he couldn't lie after beating himself up in the bathroom? I don't know how many of you have seen that movie. I've seen it 1,000 times, but he beat himself up so that he could get out of the case that he was working in court. And when the judge asked him if you are okay to continue on, and because he had that spell on him and couldn't lie, he said, yes. I find myself with that exact, scene in my head all the time. Can I keep going? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And if that's the case, like, you're being real with yourself, you've got this. And a lot of it's like breaking through that want, the willpower. Like, I think, Brad, you mentioned it right before this call. We were talking about willpower. Willpower really doesn't equal to much or anything at all, right? Like, it's not going to get you very far. It's like just doing it is going to get you through that barrier. Just do it. Just do it. I'm okay here and I'm doing fine. I'll get through it. And one side thing too, the fallen arches actually, like Brad said, absolutely. I've been able to find shoes that work for my feet best by making a good relationship with those local run stores, but also doing foot strengthening exercises. I was able to bring my foot to arch from a low to just at like a medium. And that was just from doing strength training. Like right now I'm balancing on one foot. There you go. You've got like 30 seconds per side. You do that 2 to 3 rounds. Right there, you're going to start working the muscles and strengthening your feet. And, along with that, better support while you're on your weight loss journey. You'll find that, when to push and when not to. So, but yeah, get some good shoes, man. That can make or break your running life in a heartbeat. I know from experience, like miserable times being in the wrong shoes.
Yeah, get the right fit. Get the right fit and try a bunch of shoes and just figure out what really works for you with that advice from someone that knows what they're talking about. And if you can do that, you're well on your way. There's another question here saying, are you bonking or just out of energy? I assume he's talking about when running a long time. Is it because you're bonking at a certain energy? Well, that can mean the same sort of thing. It depends on how you define energy, I suppose. But yeah, bonking is basically when you've gone through all of the carbohydrate stores and you're fueling basically on fat with just the smell of an oily rag of the carbs. And that's when you can, it's just a lot harder for the body to process that. And so your speed drops by about half. So that's what basically the bonk means. And so that means that you're out of carbohydrate fuel energy, I suppose. That, and so that can mean it's the same thing. So that's why it's important, even on a long, slow run, when you're predominantly burning fat because you're in a lower aerobic sort of zone, your heart rate's lower, you still require, even if you're predominantly burning fat in that zone, you still require carbohydrate. You still require a carbohydrates fuel source to run it at the same time. So when you bonk or you run out of that carbohydrate energy, that's when you really feel awful, your performance, your speed drops. And that's why fueling with good nutrition before, during, and after a session is so important. So that brings us right back to the start. It's not just during the run, it's before and after, and it's what you do on a consistent basis that gives you that platform to be able to perform consistently. Because you might have all the best things to eat during a run, but if you had no breakfast or just coffee and a muffin, and then you don't fuel afterwards, well, that really doesn't mean much. You've got to make sure you get all those jigsaw pieces in place when it comes to nutrition, and that is eating a really good whole food, plant-centric type diet, good quality food, good fats, and good protein sources. And if you can do that, plus fuel well on your run, and then fuel within that sort of 20 to 40 minute immediately after that session, especially if you've got another session that day, that's going to then just stack those bricks on top, create that platform, and then allow you to perform to your optimum.
Yeah, I think too, this kind of leads to what Brad and I were discussing too, as well as for Christopher, who earlier submitted that question regarding his long runs too and eating whole food. I would definitely get an app where you can track what you're eating on a daily basis. I think that I failed to mention earlier that this is what essentially ended up helping me when I was feeling that way, because I was real about like what I was eating on a daily basis. And I quite quickly, after just a week of not even changing anything about my diet, of tracking on my Fitness Pal, found that I was at a deficit as well. And specifically on that carbohydrate and protein. I shouldn't say so much carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is very easy for me. I keep taking carbohydrate all day. It was the protein side for me that I was not really reaching. Healthy fats is another thing that was easy for me. But yeah, so I mean, the first thing I think you want to start to is data. Start some data, figure out what's going on. If you're missing, connecting that MyFitnessPal or calculating, adding in what you burn during your run is super helpful for that as well, so that you've got to make up for a lot that you've lost, because you're not going to make it up during the run. So eating to that, it's really tough when I think one of the biggest questions and one of the other bigger questions we get is like when you're trying to lose weight and you are learning long distance running, maybe you're training for a half, maybe it's your first marathon and you're still trying to lose weight, you still got to remember that there's this fueling thing that you need to still be doing. You still need to fuel your body. And, I burned, 1,300 calories on my half marathon today, or my 13-mile training run. Not replacing those is where it's going to get dangerous, and I understand that with weight loss, it's like, okay, some people are like cutting calories. And this is something that I have done myself, but found very quickly that if I wasn't refueling, if I wasn't fueling towards my new endeavor, such as running, such as strength training, but I'm trying to lose weight, it was like, okay, I think at some point I'm going to have to pick and really start to lay out the grounds and plan out things. And so that's just something I wanted to make mention in regards to that earlier. We do have a couple questions coming in. Jim Greco, when you increase mileage and get sore feet, will the toughness of your feet eventually catch up, or is some type of modification needed?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think with that type of question, it's important to know, well, why are those feet getting sore? So one, making sure that the shoes are fitting correctly. I think it's something to tick off first. Second of all, it's looking at good feet stretching and strengthening. So if you can strengthen the muscles, the intrinsic muscles within your foot, it's going to help support that arch. And then also making sure that you're stretching muscles that go into the foot, so the calf musculature, making sure that that's all looked after. Then you'll find that the feet will adapt to that load better. So I think first of all, make sure your shoes are fitted correctly. Second of all, some foot stretching and strengthening exercises to do, even some dynamic stuff to do to mobilize the foot before the run, and then some static stuff to do after the run. And I know that we've got some good programs in the app that go over some foot strengthening. And we've also got some YouTube videos on that as well, on that very topic. Anything to add there, Liz?
Yeah, the injured runner program comes to mind too. And I know a lot of people get scared because of the names. Well, I'm not injured, so I'm not going in there. Like, but you know what? There's actually some great stuff. If you are like in minor pain, it's just, something you're getting through your day, check it out. Level 1 strength for your feet is exactly what Brad is saying, is like getting those mobilizations in, like you're strengthening but mobilizing at the same time. You're working your feet through their full range of motion, your big toe, and essentially finding your strength through those ranges of motion as well, along with warming up the feet. So this is something I experienced plantar fasciitis for many years until I learned the connection of the strength, because I was strength, and I wasn't really mobilizing my feet. I'm like, what do you do to mobilize your feet? So first thing I would say is ball rolling, getting a lacrosse ball, a golf ball, any kind of ball, and just getting on that ball and rolling out those feet, getting those muscles, because you have those muscles on the bottom of your feet that will get tight. And the tighter they get, that's when the soreness gets worse. And then, like, worst case scenario, you've got so much tension on your bones and tendons that you could cause a tear. So keeping the tissues happy and healthy is super important for this, and so that you can continue to increase your mileage. So I would say daily, you're getting in there, you're massaging out those feet, and you go as hard or as soft as you need. Some days you're going to be so sore that just a little bit of blood flow is going to be the key. And then some days you're going to be able to go hard because, you know what, I backed off on my running a little bit. I'm not as sore. So now I can really dig deep and get those knots out, because your feet will experience those knots just like the rest of your muscles in your body. So getting them healthy, and then maybe assessing, all right, do I have any strength in my big toe? Am I able to extend it on its own? If I'm extending it, is it going out this way or is it coming up straight? Like, these are all things that you can see and look at. And I think we've got a lot of stuff on feet, to be honest with you, even on our YouTube app alone. But I have to say, get into the Injured Runner program, because you will get a prescription for what to do. And that is all in there. And you're also going to work up the chain too, because your feet could be sore because your calves are tight. And that was the reason for my plantar fasciitis. When I finally assessed the calves and the problem I was experiencing up there, so tight, which then I won't get totally into it, but further up the chain, it was my hips too. So once I realized everything that was happening for a reason, I was able to finally alleviate that feeling and then continue to ramp up my mileage at a safe way and not be in pain. But it's a daily thing. Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes every day of giving you some self-love, some self-tender loving care, because I think we could all use more self-care here as well.
Those consistent habits are really, really important. Another question saying, have you heard of anyone who got rotator cuff surgery? If so, do you know how long it took them to get back into running after surgery? That really depends. I'm a physiotherapist, so I see rotator cuff surgeries post-op all the time. It really depends on what sort of surgery is required and then how much bracing is required afterwards. I would say ask the surgeon. They will know. And usually between 6 weeks and 3 months, you can start doing some running again. And it just has to be really easy. You don't want to put too much stress on things. But mainly you don't want people to start running too early because the risk of falling on a freshly surgically repaired rotator cuff is not worth that risk. So I would say, ask a surgeon. They'll give you some good advice regarding that. But 6 weeks to 3 months, you should be able to get back to some form of running, depending on the extent of the tear and the amount of surgery required.
We got what's a good app to use for tracking? Laughing Guy, I got 2 options for you, depending on how deep you want to go. I have MyFitnessPal, which is something I've been working with for years. The unpaid version has treated me pretty well, but you can also up your game a little bit if you do go with the premium. There's also another one called ChronoTrack. That one gets you super deep. And I mean like on a micronutrient level, on the amino acid level. Like if you want to make sure you're getting all of your essential amino acids, like when you dive deep into nutrition, that one I would say would be the one to go. Depending on how much of a data geek you are. I know I love data. And I really found that one too. We can actually even put those in the description too, as well, so that you guys can find those. But MyFitnessPal has treated me very well for years. And ChronoTrack was really cool. Actually use them side by side, because vitamin D is not something that MyFitnessPal you can log it, but it doesn't show in your profile unless you've got the premium version. So it's like little things like that. They're like,
I've got another question here saying, I'm a distance runner for my school, and a lot of the more competitive runners are pretty frail and skinny. So I'm wondering if I'm able to build muscle and physique while building a great 5K time. Look, you are. I think it's about making sure when you want to run fast, being lean is actually really important. But that doesn't mean you have to be weak and frail. There's a lot of runners, Galen Rupp, and then you got people like Mo Farah back in his heyday. They're very lean, but they actually do a lot of strength work. And so the way to get around that is you do strength work to get strong and stable without building bulk. Now, the way to do that after you get introduced to a gym program is to lift. This might sound counterintuitive, but you lift heavier weights with lower reps with big rest. And what that will do is it won't build bulk as much. You won't get as much hypertrophic growth of the muscle, but you will develop amazing strength. And so I think you can develop strength without huge bulk, and that will complement your requirements to run fast over, say, 1,500 meters, 3K, 5K. So it's not about, people may look skinny and they may look frail, but they might not be. Like if you get them to actually lift some weights in the gym, you'll see that their power to weight ratios are incredible. And so it's about getting that balance right between strength and leanness to run fast if you're competitive.
Yeah. And totally too. Like, in your off season, you could totally be doing some of that heavier stuff a couple times a week. We specifically built our running strength program where it actually introduces like Olympic style lifting for runners. And that would be something you would do twice a week, and you learn basics of the barbell. You do deadlifts, you do front squats, back squats, things that are going to build that power in your off season. They're going to focus on strength. It's an 8-week long program. And it's really great for when you're heading, when you've got 8 weeks to, maybe you get back into your season, but you could still run alongside it as well. So exactly what, if you're looking for specifics on like what to do and how to do it, as far as like what Brad was suggesting, our running strength program definitely has it laid out for you too, depending on how deep you want to go there.
Yeah, we've got Joe's just mentioned my problem is controlling hunger during marathon training. I would say that maybe it's not about controlling hunger. It's about listening to the body and making sure you're adequately fueled. So it's, again, probably going back to the basics and making sure that you're eating enough calories to be able to do your training effectively. And just maybe having a good look at that, making sure that you're eating, before, after, with that sort of 20 to 40 minute window with that, 3-4 to 1 carbohydrate to protein ratio, and then fueling well during those sessions. So it's not maybe about controlling hunger. It's about making sure you're having enough adequate nutrition to fuel your training so that you feel satiated and then you're not feeling hungry all the time. So maybe going a bit back to some of those basics.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome. Looks like we can take a couple more questions. I think we've got a couple in the box already. For some reason, I'm looking at it. It doesn't look right to me. I can't really read it, and it looks like it's been cut off.
What do you
want to know if we're actually Tom Cruise? But it looks like I'm running a 100-mile relay that starts at noon.
In Texas in
August. What are some of your tips for running in the heat? Ooh, yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, so my tips for running in the heat are two main ones. That's make sure you're hydrated, and second of all, run slower. I really think a lot of people, when it comes to running and training in the heat, simply run too fast. And what you need to understand is that when you're running in the heat, you've got to allow your heart rate's going to rise, because basically you want to get blood to the surface to be able to dissipate heat, which means there's not going to be quite as much going to the skeletal muscle, which means your performance is going to be hampered. So it's sometimes about just slowing down a little bit to allow for that environmental heat. Two, dress for it. Make sure that you've got that you're covering surfaces, that you've got a hat on, and that you're hydrating as well. I think that's really important. And look, I was listening to this is maybe a little bit out of the box, but I was listening to a podcast by Andrew Huberman a couple of months ago, and he was suggesting that if you actually put ice on the wrists and around the palms of your hands, that's actually going to be a really good way to dissipate heat quickly, which is something I hadn't heard before. So apparently what's happening now is there's a lot of research on wearing cooling mitts. So this is something that's just coming out. And if you're wearing these cooling mitts around the wrists, that's actually a more effective way of cooling the system down than simply just throwing ice over your head or water over your head. So that's something a little bit outside the box, but it's something that's probably going to be coming into the mainstream in the next couple of years, is this different way, or more effective way, of cooling the system off. So I might put a link. We can put a link in that. But Andrew Huberman's got some fantastic stuff on cooling the system down and how to improve performance in the heat.
Technology, man, that's amazing. I will say, I hope that you're already on this game, the hydration train game. Stay hydrated all day, every day, but you're specifically making sure the week before this race that you are making sure you're hydrating with electrolytes, like you are getting it in. So you just be sure that you're doing that to make sure that you're on top of it. So your body's less likely to bonk or hit that wall. And it will run better for you, because in order for your body to disperse its own cooling system, it needs water. So be sure that you're doing that ahead of time.
Yeah. And another question here. Hello, I've just started training for first half marathon. I'm feeling pretty tired afterwards for the rest of the day. What foods can help with this? Well, again, I'd go back to also making sure that the training is done adequately. Sometimes the biggest mistake I see in first-time athletes is they go out and run their long run too fast. And when you do that repeatedly, week after week after week, you can dig yourself a hole and get quite fatigued. So it's important to understand that that long run, most of the time, is done at a pace that's actually quite easy, and so that you should get back from that long run and don't feel too beat up, too tired. So that would be my first thing. So rather than nutrition, look at your training intensity, making sure you're getting those differences between that long, sort of slower type run, and then maybe some of that short, faster stuff during the week that's a little bit shorter in duration. And that will allow you, again, your body, your system, to adapt to that load and get get that restoration afterwards as well. And then in terms of food, it's again eating good quality food immediately after the session, between the 20 to 40 minute window, and possibly on the longer runs, making sure you're having a little bit during as well to get the body used to processing fuel, and then maybe that'll impact and improve that fatigue feeling afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And what Brad said is like making sure that your program was right for you when you started it, essentially. You know, that you were at the right place for where it started. I personally have experienced those spreadsheet training plans where I started at like 25 miles a week when realistically I was only at maybe 5 to 10, maybe a couple runs a week, and found myself in dire straits pretty darn quick. That first week of training, it was too much, too soon. And so, yeah, just being sure that you're on the right path, you're on the right one for you. It starts where you are, meet your body where it's at. Oh, pee your pants, Jim. No, I'm just kidding. And he's just remembered to hit the bathroom all race long. I try not to have to do that, but what you'll find is that you're sweating a lot of it out. If you're hydrating well, you should be going. But depending on how long the race is, I mean, this is going to sound horrible for being a coach, but I'll promise you I wasn't a coach then. But my first ultra marathon, I don't remember going to the bathroom at all. And I was out there for 10 and a half hours. I know when I was drinking, I was constantly drinking and always had enough water. I ran out of fuel at one point. That was the hard part. But yeah, I mean, again, that kind of goes back to making sure that you're hydrated all day, every day. You know, like that all of a sudden on race day, like, yeah, now I'm going to put my hydration game on and I'm going to start hydrating. There's no way your body's going to keep up with hydration. After you've been probably, and I think one big problem I think nutritionally in the world is like people are always dehydrated. They're like functioning dehydrated people. And I was one of them. But yeah, people just aren't hydrating enough, so finding out like what you should be getting every day and drinking to that each and every day. And then making sure that like you are practicing this while you're, I think that's the biggest thing is you're just now's not the time. Like your race day is not the time to go, okay, I'm going to hyperhydrate unless it's like, anyways, yeah, no, it's just not the time, so yes, definitely hydrating throughout, but only remember that your body's not going to be able to handle it if it's something new to your body. You have to get your body used to actually hydrating itself. So, if you ever notice that, okay, I'm going to start drinking water more every day, and you start drinking water all day, every day, and you find yourself in the bathroom twice an hour, or more, that's your body. Like it's not really ready to handle all that water all at once. That's why getting electrolytes in can help with absorption. But also just you're getting your body used to it on the daily basis versus not just like come race day or come your training run. Yeah.
Probably just do maybe just 2 or 3 more questions, but just one here saying, how do you come up with all of your topics and ideas for your YouTube videos?
You guys.
We basically just we have meetings every few weeks and we talk about what's topics are relevant. And I think we're all sort of running nerds, so we all read and watch a lot of running, and we might get ideas and then decide on our take on that idea. So I don't know about you, Liz, but I'm always every day just putting in little ideas on my I've got an Evernote that I put in, and just little ideas that I think about, and then think of a topic, and I've always got 5 or 6 of those just floating around, and then we just meet as a team and decide what videos are going to resonate, what are going to be helpful for our community. We just want to make sure that everybody in the run experience community is getting good information to help their run experience, help them run better, help them run more happy. And so that's how we do it. It's a really fun process. It's we really enjoy getting information out and just making sure that information is appropriate and resonates well with the community.
Yeah, if you guys too have ideas that you want to submit to us, you can also email directly at liz@therunexperience.com. Make sure you put in the subject YouTube video topic idea, and we will add that to our Evernote, and we'll discuss it and talk about it. And thank you, Corey, for that. Um,
Yeah. And Travis is asking, is there any benefits in training more in zone 1 as opposed to zone 2? Would it hurt to do more in zone 2? For me, zone 2 is kind of that's easy to steady run region. Zone 1 is more about recovery and warm up. So I think there's a difference between that zone 1 and zone 2 in terms of benefits. They each serve a purpose, and so you should have zone 1 and zone 2 in your training week. I would say it's not a good idea to go and just train in zone 1 all the time, because that's, as I say, more recovery and warm up, warm down. Where zone 2 is where you're going to get a little bit more aerobic adaptation. So I think they both serve a purpose.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're thinking, too, there's like that 80-20 rule. When they consider the 80-20 rule, like the 80% of your runs is the slower runs, you're looking at zone 1 and zone 2, but those zone 1s definitely are more reserved for recovery days, active recovery. And perhaps even when you're doing intervals, your recovery zone.
Max has asked a good question about sore calves after most runs, but not during, and they always go away after a night's rest. Is this normal? Yes and no. I think it's normal to get sort of sore muscles after a run. If it's bilateral, so if it's happening on both sides, then for me, that's not as much of a concern as if it's happening unilaterally on one side at a time. So it's just making sure that story doesn't get worse. If those calves are getting sorer and sorer and sorer during the run, it's again looking at that loading, looking at your run duration, frequency, and intensity, making some changes there. So it's really just keeping an eye on those sort of symptoms, because if they go away and it feels good for the next run, that's probably fine. That's just normal adaptation.
Yeah. And if you've got some issues with that, I would say get a good calf warm up before the run. And that might help even with the recovery. But perhaps getting on the foam roller after your run as well. After fueling, your appropriate refuel, making sure you get on that foam roller and just get the blood flowing in there, and maybe some light stretching, or even getting as low as some soleus stretching as well. Because something is going on for sure. And just addressing those areas, and then see what else pops up, and then you work on those areas as well.
Yeah. Another good question by Brian saying, when do you suggest people lose weight before beginning running rather than run and consequently lose weight? It's an individual question. And so what I will do with my clients is, if someone comes in and they're obese, they're morbidly obese, I probably won't get them running. We'll start with just walking, and maybe some water work, and then as the weight comes off, we can then safely get a jog walk program. Someone might come in that's just mildly overweight and is able to do some running. So it depends on their athletic history, how overweight they are, what their bodies can handle. We find that starting point within capacity and move them up. The worst thing you can do with someone that's obese or very, very overweight is just start straight into a running program with no athletic history beforehand. You're just asking for an injury. So it really is just making sure that you talk with your client, your patient, and get a plan that they feel really comfortable with, and that you're working well within capacity. So you just develop those good habits around consistent exercise first and foremost, before you maybe look at a consistent running program.
Right. Oh, well, it looks like first of all, I just say thank you guys for coming in and, dropping your questions, and you are welcome. We're glad we can help. And All She Dreams would love to see content on returning to run postpartum. Good vibes. You will probably be seeing that from me, as I've experienced it myself. And, kind of the do's and don'ts, and, core strengthening, core rebuilding, is the way to go. So I would love to actually, that's been something that's on my Evernote for a long time, to actually go deep into returning to running postpartum, because I actually did it. And in actually getting involved in all the different ways, whether you were postpartum, standard birth, or I should say standard, because, nowadays it's any kind of birth is a birth, but however your birthing experience was, having content directly related to that and helping you get through it, whether that was a C-section or, the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd like to second that. Thanks everyone for joining us for this live. We love doing them. We love connecting with the community and just talking all good things: running, wellness, nutrition. So yeah, any questions and ideas about future videos or lives, then let us know. Let us know in the comments. We love to connect, and we look forward to catching up with all of you next time.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good one.